It's easy to give up on our dreams and think, I'll never get well. I'll never meet the right person, never get out of this problem.
He built the biggest church in America on a single word: hope. For 25 years, every scandal bounced off him like water off glass. But the verdict that just came in is the one no smile can survive. The smile that outlasted everything.
Criticize you for preaching prosperity, because what kind of God wants you to be poor and miserable?
There is a version of Joel Osteen that most people know. The one on the poster, the one on the book cover, the one standing on a stage the size of a football field, smiling at 50,000 people like he has never had a bad day in his life. That version of Joel Osteen has survived things that would have finished almost anyone else in his position. He survived a hurricane. He survived a shooting inside his own church. He survived a plumber cracking open a bathroom wall and finding $600,000 in envelopes that nobody could explain. He survived all of it, and every Sunday after every scandal, he walked back onto that stage, opened his Bible, and smiled like it never happened. That smile became his brand. It also became his armor. But something has shifted, quietly and then all at once, the way things tend to shift when they have been building for a long time. The people who once defended him have started going quiet. The critics who spent years being dismissed as bitter or faithless are now being listened to. And the institution he built, the one his father started in a dusty feed store in Northeast Houston with 90 people and a borrowed folding chair, is facing questions that no smile and no sermon can answer anymore. This is the story of how Joel Osteen got here, not the version he tells from the stage, or the one in his books, and he has written more than 25 of them, 7 of which hit #1 on the New York Times list. The real version, the one with the gaps in it. It was the one where the numbers do not always add up, and the explanations do not always hold, and the people who trusted him most were sometimes the ones who had the least. To understand where Joel Osteen is right now, you have to understand something important. He did not build what he has today by accident. He built it piece by piece, decision by decision, over more than 2 decades. And the same decisions that made him the most recognizable pastor in the world are the exact same decisions that are now being used against him. That is the thing about building something this big. When it is standing, it looks like a miracle. When it starts to crack, everything inside it is suddenly visible. And what is visible now is enough to make even his most loyal followers ask a question they have been avoiding for years. Who is Joel Osteen really? That question did not start in a courtroom. It did not start with a federal investigation or a criminal charge. Joel Osteen has never been arrested. He has never been indicted or stood before a judge. The sentence that has finally been handed down to him did not come from a jury. It came from something slower and in many ways more permanent than a verdict. It came from the public record, from the documents, headlines, and the testimonies that have stacked up over 25 years into something that can no longer be ignored. From the financial ratings that gave his church one of the lowest transparency scores in the country. It came from the survivors and the former members and the critics inside the faith who kept saying the same things year after year and kept being told they were wrong. The sentence that has been decided for Joel Osteen is a reputational one. And in the world he lives in, where image is everything and the smile on the book cover is the product, reputation is the only thing that matters. Once it is gone, it does not come back. The question now is not whether the damage has been done. It has. The question is how it happened. How a man this powerful, protected, and surrounded by loyalty and money and the goodwill of millions of believers ended up here. The answer starts long before Joel ever stepped onto a stage. It started with a man named John. It starts in 1959, and it starts with a feed store, the empire John Osteen built and Joel inherited. The story of Joel Osteen does not begin with Joel Osteen. It begins with his father, a man named John Hilton Osteen. And if you want to understand how Lakewood Church became what it is today, you have to understand what kind of man John was. Because John Osteen was not a soft man. He was not a man who stumbled into ministry by accident. He was a man who fought for everything he built, lost things along the way, and kept going anyway. That stubbornness, that refusal to quit, was the first thing he passed down to his son. John was born on the 21st of August, 1921, in Paris, Texas. He became a Southern Baptist minister before he was even 18 years old. While he was there, he studied hard and earned a bachelor's degree, then a master's degree, and a doctorate in divinity from Oral Roberts University. He was serious about the faith in his work, and for a long time, everything in his life looked like it was going exactly where it was supposed to go. Then his daughter was born. In 1958, John and his wife Dodie had a baby girl named Lisa. She was born with a condition that resembled cerebral palsy. For a man who had built his entire life around the idea that God was in control, this broke something open inside him. It did not break his faith. Instead, it changed it. He later described that season as the moment he experienced what he called the baptism of the Holy Ghost. He walked away from the Southern Baptist Convention. He embraced charismatic Christianity, and he decided to start over. On Mother's Day, the 10th of May, 1959, John Osteen founded Lakewood Church in a converted feed store on the outskirts of Northeast Houston. Around 90 people came to the first service. The building was dusty and the chairs were folding. There was nothing impressive about any of it, but John was not building for impressiveness. He was building for something else entirely. The church grew slowly at first, then faster, then in ways that surprised even the people inside it. By 1979, weekly attendance had passed 5,000. In 1988, a new 8,000-seat sanctuary was completed. The church had become something real, something with weight and reach, and a name people recognized beyond Houston. Joel grew up inside all of this. He was born on the 5th of March, 1963, the fourth of 5 children. He watched his father preach. He watched his mother Dodie survive a cancer diagnosis that doctors said should have killed her. He watched the church grow from a feed store into an institution. And despite all of that, despite being raised inside one of the most dynamic ministries in Texas, Joel had absolutely no desire to preach. None. He enrolled at Oral Roberts University after high school, studying radio and television communications. He lasted 1 semester and came back to Houston in 1982 and went to work behind the camera, not in front of it. He built Lakewood's television ministry, directed productions, and stayed in the background for 17 years. Every time his father asked him to preach, he said no. That detail matters more than people realize, because the man who would one day stand in front of 50,000 people every Sunday and speak with total confidence was, for almost 2 decades, the son who could not bring himself to open his mouth in church. Then came January of 1999. John Osteen was in the hospital. His heart and kidneys were failing. He asked Joel to preach one more time. Joel said no. Then something changed his mind. He called back within minutes. And on the 17th of January, 1999, wearing a pair of his father's shoes for courage, Joel Osteen preached his very first sermon to a congregation of 6,000 people. John listened over the phone from his hospital bed. Nurses later told Joel they had never seen his father so proud. 6 days later, John Osteen was dead. Joel was 35 years old. He had preached exactly 1 sermon in his entire life. And now, the church his father had built from nothing was sitting in his hands, waiting to see what he would do with it. Nobody, not even Joel, knew what was coming next. The biggest church in America and the theology that divided it. When Joel Osteen took over Lakewood Church in October of 1999, nobody expected what happened next. Not the congregation or the city of Houston. Not the wider Christian world that had watched John Osteen build something solid and steady over 4 decades. They expected continuity and a son who would maintain what his father left behind. What they got instead was something nobody had a category for. Joel tried at first to preach like his father. Same fire, force, and theological weight. It did not work. He has admitted this himself. He stood at that pulpit trying to sound like John Osteen, and it felt wrong every single time. A few months in, something shifted. He said he felt a clear direction, almost like a voice telling him to stop trying to be his father and start being himself. He later described it simply. He said he felt like he heard the words, "Joel, your dad fulfilled his purpose. Go be you." So he did. And what Joel Osteen was, it turned out, was something the American church had never quite seen before. He was not a theologian, nor was he a fire and brimstone preacher. He was not interested in guilt or condemnation, or the kind of hard edges that had defined serious evangelical preaching for generations. What he was interested in was hope, positivity, the idea that God wanted people to succeed. that faith and prosperity and a good life were not in conflict with each other, but were in fact the same thing pointing in the same direction. The crowds came immediately, then they kept coming. By 2001, the 8,000-seat sanctuary his father had built could no longer hold the people showing up every Sunday. Joel needed somewhere bigger. What he found was one of the most audacious real estate moves in the history of American religion. In December of 2001, Houston City Council approved a 30-year lease giving Lakewood Church access to the former Compaq Center, a 16,800-seat arena where the Houston Rockets had played for nearly 3 decades. Lakewood poured approximately $95 million into renovations. They took a basketball arena and turned it into a church. On the 16th of July, 2005, they opened the doors. 56,000 people came to the grand opening. The governor of Texas was there. It was the largest church in the United States. And Joel Osteen was its pastor. Then came the books. In October of 2004, Joel published his first book. It was called Your Best Life Now: 7 Steps to Living at Your Full Potential. It debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. It stayed there for more than 2 years. The book sold over 8 million copies worldwide. That single book transformed Joel from a megachurch pastor into a national brand. He followed it with Become a Better You in 2007. The book reportedly came with an advance of more than $8 million and a first printing of 4 million copies. Over the years, he published 7 #1 New York Times bestsellers. 7. By any measurement, it was an extraordinary run. But the bigger he got, the louder the critics became. And this is where the story turns. Because the theology Joel was preaching, the one that was filling that 16,000-seat arena every single week, was not sitting well with everyone watching. Serious theologians had a name for it. They called it the prosperity gospel. The idea that God rewards faith with financial blessing, that your best life is available to you right now if you believe hard enough and give generously enough. Michael Horton, a theology professor at Westminster Seminary in California, appeared on a CBS news program in 2007 and called Joel's message a cotton candy gospel. He said it could be reduced to 3 sentences. God is nice. You are nice. Be nice. He argued that Joel handled Scripture the way someone handles a fortune cookie, pulling out the cheerful parts and leaving everything else behind. John MacArthur went further. The pastor of Grace Community Church called Joel a pagan religionist and said Jesus was barely present in his message. He looked at the title, Your Best Life Now, and said, the only way the title makes sense is if the person reading it is going to hell. That line spread everywhere. Joel responded the way he always responded, calmly, positively. He went on 60 Minutes and asked what could possibly be dangerous about giving people hope. It was a good answer. It was also the answer of a man who had learned very early that the smile was always more powerful than the argument. But the smile was about to be tested in ways no book could prepare him for. The scandals that should have ended him. Every public figure has a moment that should finish them. For some, it is one moment, a headline or a decision that lands so badly there is no recovering from it. For Joel Osteen, the moments kept coming, one after another, spread across years. Each one arriving just when the last one was starting to fade. And every single time, he walked back onto that stage and kept going. The question that nobody could answer was simple. How? The first real test came not from Joel, but from his wife. On the 19th of December, 2005, Victoria Osteen boarded a Continental Airlines flight from Houston to Vail, Colorado. She noticed a small stain on the armrest of her first-class seat and asked for it to be cleaned. What followed was a confrontation that ended with a flight attendant named Sharon Brown, claiming Victoria had pushed her against a bathroom door and elbowed her in the chest. The FAA fined Victoria $3,000 for interfering with a crew member. Brown then filed a civil lawsuit demanding an apology and punitive damages equal to 10% of Victoria Osteen's net worth. The trial ran in August of 2008. Brown told the court Victoria had called her the devil. Joel took the stand and called it an unfortunate misunderstanding. After less than 3 hours of deliberation, the jury sided with Victoria. The jury foreman summed it up in 5 words. This was a complete waste of time. Joel smiled. The church moved on. Then came Harvey. Hurricane Harvey made landfall on the 26th of August, 2017. It dumped more than 60 inches of rain on parts of Houston. It became one of the costliest natural disasters in American history. And in the middle of it, Lakewood Church posted a message on Facebook saying the building was inaccessible due to severe flooding and directing displaced residents to other shelters. People drove to the church anyway. They filmed what they saw. The building looked dry, and the parking lot looked reachable. As the videos went everywhere, the backlash was immediate and brutal. Critics pointed out that Joel Osteen had a net worth estimated at over $50 million and a church that could seat 16,800 people. And his response to one of the worst natural disasters in Texas history was a Facebook post. By Monday, the 28th of August, the story had become a national conversation. That evening, Joel released a statement saying Lakewood had never closed its doors. By Tuesday, the church opened for sheltering. Around 300 people took refuge there. Volunteers showed up. Real help was given. But the internet had already written its version of the story. What made it worse was the comparison. While Joel was doing media interviews defending himself, a Houston furniture store owner named Jim Mackingvale, known locally as Mattress Mac, had already opened his showrooms to hundreds of evacuees and sent trucks out to rescue stranded families. He became the hero of Harvey. Joel became the punchline. The bathroom wall came next. In March of 2014, Lakewood Church reported that roughly $600,000 had been stolen from its safe. The money included $200,000 in cash and $400,000 in checks. Crime Stoppers offered a reward. Nobody was ever arrested. The church collected on its insurance and the case went cold. Then, in November of 2021, a plumber named Justin Cawley was fixing a loose toilet in a public bathroom at Lakewood Church. He moved some insulation. Around 500 envelopes fell out of the wall. They contained cash, checks, and money orders. Houston police confirmed the find was connected to the 2014 theft. The statute of limitations had already expired. No charges could be filed, and no arrests were ever made. The plumber received a $20,000 reward. Joel said nothing publicly that satisfied anyone. Then, in 2020, during the COVID shutdown, Lakewood applied for and received $4.4 million in Paycheck Protection Program funds. It was the third largest PPP loan in the Houston area. The backlash was ferocious. The hashtag to tax the churches trended nationally. Lakewood eventually announced it would repay the full amount rather than seek forgiveness. And then, in February of 2024, a woman walked into Lakewood Church carrying a rifle and opened fire. That story is darker than anything that came before it, and it raised questions about Lakewood that nobody has fully answered yet. The verdict of the people. On the 11th of February 2024, a Sunday afternoon, a 36-year-old woman named Janesse Yvonne Moreno walked into Lakewood Church carrying an AR-15 style rifle. She had a second weapon in a bag. She got through a west entrance, confronted an unarmed security guard, moved into a hallway, and opened fire. 2 off-duty law enforcement officers working church security responded immediately. They returned fire. Moreno was shot and killed. But the worst part of the story was not the shooter. Her 7-year-old son was with her. The boy, Samuel, was shot in the head. He was rushed to Texas Children's Hospital. Doctors performed 5 brain surgeries. He went into cardiac arrest multiple times. Surgeons removed half the right side of his skull. He lost part of his frontal lobe. The doctors said 4 words that nobody in that hospital wanted to hear. Sam will never be Sam again. A 57-year-old bystander was also shot and later released. Details that emerged afterward made everything worse. Moreno had a documented history of schizophrenia. She had still been able to legally purchase the AR-15 in December of 2023. Her former mother-in-law told reporters the tragedy had been predictable and preventable. Joel Osteen spoke to the press that day. He said they were devastated. He added that it could have been a lot worse. That sentence landed badly, not because it was wrong, it could have been worse, but because it sounded, to a lot of people listening, like a man who had spent so many years managing optics that he had forgotten how to just sit in a moment of pain without framing it. That is the thing that had been quietly building for years. It was not any single scandal that finally turned the tide on Joel Osteen. It was the accumulation and the pattern. Scandal arrives, Joel stays calm, frames it carefully, and smiles. He moves on. Repeat. At some point, people stopped seeing the calm as strength. They started seeing it as distance, and the numbers began to reflect that. Ministry Watch, an organization that monitors Christian ministries and evaluates them on financial transparency and accountability, gave Lakewood Church an F for financial transparency. Not a low grade or a warning, an F. They also gave the church a donor confidence score of 3 out of 100, one of the lowest ratings in the entire country. The reason was structural. Because Lakewood is classified as a church rather than a ministry, it is not required by law to file public financial disclosures. It does not have to show the public where the money goes. And it does not. Reports from the Houston Chronicle and the Financial Times found that in fiscal year 2017, less than 1.5% of Lakewood's funds went to charitable causes. That amounted to approximately $1.2 million out of $89 million in total income. Let that number settle for a moment. A church taking in $89 million a year and giving $1.2 million of it away. In a city, in a country, in a world full of people who needed more than a smile and a book about their best life. Joel had stopped taking his $200,000 annual salary from the church back in 2005. He supported himself through book royalties and speaking fees, reportedly around $50,000 per outside appearance. He and Victoria live in a 17,000 square foot mansion in Houston's River Oaks neighborhood, purchased in 2010 for $10.5 million. Current estimates place its value between $14 and $16 million. Annual property taxes alone run approximately $260,000. None of that is illegal. None of it is hidden. It is all part of the public record. But the public record is exactly the problem. The picture that forms is not the one on the book cover. It is not the smiling man with the open Bible and the hopeful message. It is something else entirely. And once people saw that picture clearly, they could not unsee it. The smile had finally stopped working. What goodbye actually looks like. Here is the thing about a reputational sentence. It does not arrive with a gavel. There is no courtroom or judge. No moment where someone stands up and reads the verdict out loud. It arrives slowly, then it arrives all at once. And by the time most people realize it has happened, it has already been decided. That is where Joel Osteen is today. He is still standing, Lakewood Church is still open, the 16,000-seat arena still fills up on Sundays. The books are still on the shelves. The television broadcasts still reach millions of households around the world. On the surface, nothing looks finished. Nothing looks over, but something has changed that cannot be unchanged. The trust is gone, not all of it. Joel Osteen still has defenders, passionate ones, people who will tell you that his message pulled them out of depression, that his books got them through divorce, through grief, through the kind of darkness that swallows people whole. Those testimonies are real, they are not nothing, and it would be dishonest to tell this story without acknowledging them. But testimony is not the same as accountability. And accountability is the thing Lakewood Church has never fully submitted to. That is the open wound at the center of all of this. Not the hurricane, the bathroom wall, or the shooting. Those were moments. Painful, damaging moments, but moments nonetheless. The deeper problem is the system underneath them. A church that takes in nearly $90 million a year and answers to nobody about where it goes. A leader who built his identity on hope and generosity while living in a $16 million mansion and giving away less than 2 cents of every dollar his congregation brought through the door. The critics who said this for years were called jealous. They were called faithless. They were told they did not understand ministry, grace, and what it meant to build something from nothing, the way Joel Osteen did in that feed store in 1959. But the critics were not wrong. They were just early. What happens to Lakewood now is the question nobody has cleanly answered. Joel Osteen is 62 years old. He has no obvious successor. His son Jonathan has been involved in the church, but has not stepped into a leadership role that would suggest a clear handover is coming. The institution that his grandfather started, grew, and he turned into a global brand, is sitting on a foundation that has more cracks in it than the outside walls suggest. And the generation now making decisions about where to give their money, trust, and their Sunday mornings is not the generation that gave Joel Osteen the benefit of the doubt. They grew up with the Harvey footage. They grew up with the bathroom wall story, watching the clips of him on Larry King Live, avoiding the question about who goes to heaven. They are not angry, but simply uninterested. And uninterested is harder to recover from than angry. Angry people come back. Uninterested people do not. That is the goodbye that is already happening. Not a dramatic exit, a resignation, an arrest, or a scandal so large it collapses everything overnight. Just a slow, steady, irreversible drift. Congregation by congregation. Donation by donation. Sunday by Sunday. Joel Osteen built an empire on the belief that your best life is still ahead of you. The evidence now suggests that for Lakewood Church, the best days are already behind it, and no amount of smiling is going to change that. Joel Osteen spent 25 years telling the world that hope was enough. For a long time, enough people believed him to make it true. But hope without accountability is just a feeling, and feelings, no matter how powerful, do not hold an empire together forever. The sentence has been decided. History will write the rest.